Good afternoon to those coming into the webinar. We're going to give it a couple of minutes here and let as many people come in as possible. Okay, then we get going. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our highly anticipated Unlocking Business Efficiency with AI and Automation webinar. My name is Mike Hanf, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, please note the following housekeeping items. All participants have been placed in listen-only mode to minimize disruptions. We kindly ask to keep your cameras turned off throughout the presentation. We do encourage questions at any time during the presentation. Simply click on the chat panel in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, enter your question in the dialog box, and click the send button. We are pleased to have Jessica McClellan, our Practice Growth Manager, monitor the chat to address your questions throughout today's presentation. This webinar is also being recorded for your convenience. You'll receive a copy of the recording along with the presentation materials in the coming days. Feel free to go back and rewatch and certainly ask Paul and I any questions that you have in the coming days. Finally, for those who would like to have continuing professional education, that will be available after the webinar. We'll have a couple of poll questions. Please make sure that if you are looking for a CPE, that you participate in those poll questions. Also, at the end of it, we will send out a kind of a question and would love to have your feedback. Your feedback is valuable in guiding our future outreach efforts and specifically on AI and automation. All right, so let's get after it. So today we have a fantastic guest. So Paul Koneski is president of Method Automation. Paul, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here and definitely a topic I'm very passionate about. So looking forward to digging in.
Excellent. Well, before we dive into the substance, I just want to set the stage a little bit. Paul, I think a lot of our attendees today have heard the terms the AI, automation, machine learning, right? They're just everywhere. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what William Vaughan Company and Method Automation actually do? And why are the two of us teaming together on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So Method Automation specializes in helping businesses identify where automation and AI can make a real difference, not just in chatbots, right, or flashy things, but more practical, return on investment driven solutions. Where William Vaughan brings that deep kind of technical or expertise on the financial and operational side. So together, I think both we can speak on the technology and the business impact. So today is really about kind of bridging those two worlds for your audience here.
It's awesome. I love that framing, right? Practical and ROI driven. That's exactly what our clients care about. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. By the end of our time together today, attendees are going to walk away understanding what AI actually is. I think all of us hear AI every single day, and I think all of us have our own little bend or twist to what AI means. And hopefully at the end of this, we'll have a lot better understanding as far as what do we actually mean by AI, right? So where it's been, I guess, used right now in the real world, and critically, if you're kind of at the beginning of your journey as far as how can AI apply for your organization, right? How do you actually get started without making the costly mistakes that we've all heard about? Does that sound like a plan, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it.
All right, so let's start from the top. AI is one of those terms that gets thrown around constantly, but I find that a lot of business owners and executives aren't totally sure what it encompasses. Can you break it down for us in plain English?
Yeah, so really, if you wanted to look at it, think of it as like three practical buckets, right? That all have a specific purpose. The first one everybody's probably hearing about is large language models or LLMs. You'll hear that term a lot. Those are your Chat GPTs, your Claudes, your Google Geminis. Those are your prompts, right? Where you're asking it questions, fix this email, do whatever you need to do. And those things are great for like research, generating documents, drafting your communications, fixing up those emails, right? Or pulling insights from a large amount of unstructured text. The second is robotic process automation. or you'll hear the term RPA a lot. What that is it's automating repetitive tasks, rule-based tasks, things that humans does by clicking through a series of screens or doing data entry over and over and over again. And then the third bucket is AI agents. And you're starting to hear a lot more about this too, which is these are a little more sophisticated. So these can make decisions, they can orchestrate your workflows, and they act like intelligent assistants across multiple systems.
Interesting. So we're actually not talking about one thing at all, right? We're really
Yeah.
talking about a family of technologies, a family of tools and solutions, each with their different strengths. And also, what I'm kind of catching on to is they're not independent tools. They're tools that we might actually use in combination with each other.
Exactly. So, I mean, really, the power comes when you're blending all these technologies together, whether it be the automated workflow. So, think about it as a well-designed solution might look like this, where you have a large language model that reads an incoming email, an RPA process that says, "Oh, I found an invoice. Let me grab all that data in that invoice and process it and put it into a format that's standard." And hand it off to an AI agent that says, "Oh, okay, now I'm going to match it up to my ERP system. I'm going to match it up to my accounting system because it's an invoice, or it might need to be routed for it's a new vendor, or it's just accounting tasks that need to be handled." But again, all of that happens without a human touching it. So that's where the value comes in.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, so I guess I'd like to shift gears here a little bit. So we've kind of laid a bit of foundation. So AI, what are we talking about? I think all of us have heard maybe some kind of myths and kind of some pitfalls out there.
Uh,
I just want to address kind of I guess some of those as far as there's fear, right, that AI is going to take people's jobs. I guess what do you say to that?
yeah, I mean, that's probably the number one thing that we hear and we get a lot of. And the headlines don't help, right? Because that's all they really talk about is replacing human bodies, and that's where the value is. Uh, but the reality that we've seen with all of the organizations that we worked with and implemented things of this nature is it augments human roles. It frees up your team from doing the tedious, repetitive work so they can focus on really higher value activities like strategy, client relationships, problem solving, things that can make them more competitive in their vertical market space. The teams that embrace it don't shrink; they actually just become more capable.
It's interesting you say that. I just in practice, the thing that I've seen, if you have AI and you think in terms of the team and the human culture and potentially the AI eroding some of that human culture, from what I've seen, it actually has the opposite effect, right? Because we're taking away the
Yeah.
tedious activities, because we're taking away the things that individuals aren't passionate about when they're showing up to work, when they're showing up to do their tasks as part of their teams, they're in such a better frame of mind that it's actually making it more cohesive. It's improving the human culture versus eroding away the human culture.
Yeah, it gives the companies the ability to scale up without having to add additional resources too. So think of it from that perspective.
Yeah. So the other thing that we keep hearing about out there is so all of us forever, right, thinking old school kind of technology have heard junk in, junk out, right? So we're so ingrained in thinking about the quality and cleanliness of our data. And if we don't have this perfect data, then we can't actually deploy some of these resources and tools and actually get the good answers. So can you speak a little bit to, if I'm just fearful of this is all great, but I'm not going to do it yet because my data is just not ready yet.
Yeah, I mean, we hear that too, right? And it's because, let's be honest, when it comes to computer systems, like, so your house may be as neat as a museum, right? But when it comes to a hard drive, we are all naturally hoarders, right? We keep those documents for years and years and years. And in some cases, from your perspective and a tax perspective, you're going to want to keep those for 4, 5, 6, 7 years for historical and audit purposes, right? So there is some value to that. But what we actually see is AI is really great at, you know, picking up and understanding that unstructured data, those PDFs, scanned documents, emails. You don't need a perfectly clean data warehouse. And that used to be the truth 5 years ago. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even. Now it's not. Now, obviously, you want to look at what you want to put into that AI engine to ingest and to start asking questions about. And that's really critical too. You don't want to just copy your whole M drive over. So, because there may be stuff in there that you really just don't ever really need. So why pay AI to ingest it? But it shouldn't be a blocker from getting started for sure.
Excellent, excellent. So what other misconceptions should we clear up here?
Yeah, I think I think the number one misconception is that we're going to turn on this AI agent and it's going to do everything in our accounting department for us. Period. And we can just get rid of everybody. I think that's crazy. I think one of the things that we always tell people when we're looking at AI or implementing something for a company is there needs to be human oversight. Um, the one thing that people always think is, hey, if in fact I'm just having AI do it, it's a dangerous thought, right? The best implementations have humans in the loop for quality control and execution, and even exception handling, right? Because there may be cases that the AI can't handle. The AI should be smart enough to route it to somebody into your organization that manages that can make a decision. So there's also a belief that AI adoption is too expensive or complex for mid-sized businesses, and it's just not simply true anymore. I mean, it's one of those other misconceptions. The cost has come down, dramatically, and if in fact you are putting it in places to solve those problems that typically take humans a lot of time to do, um, it can pay huge dividends for pennies. I did with one customer a couple of weeks ago. They have drawings that they receive from their clients, their architectural drawings, but they're all in metrics. And he said, well, we want them in English. And it takes me 5 to 6 hours to do a drawing and convert it. And I was able to give it to an AI model and it converted it and actually marked up the entire PDF drawing with the English measurements in under a minute. So he went from 6 hours of his day that he typically gets is just sitting in front of a calculator and a drawing and handwriting things to less than 30 seconds, 60 seconds that his drawing was done. So I gave him 6 hours back of his time. So, you kind of have to look at that cost benefit analysis too, which is how much is your time worth? How much is his time worth? He's one of the owners of the company that was doing this. How
Sure,
much is
sure.
his time worth? Which is, 30 seconds of tokens.
Well, excellent. That's actually a perfect segue into our next kind of section here, kind of talking about some of the actual kind of real world kind of proof points and kind of case studies. Before that, though, we're going to pause for a quick poll. All righty. So let's talk about some real world use cases. So, um, Paul, since like William Vaughan, right, we're an accounting firm, kind of seems a little bit natural. Let's
Yep.
start with the function closest to our hearts, right? Accounting and finance. What does AI automation, well, AI and automation look like on the ground there?
Yeah, I mean, accounts payable is probably one of the best entry points you could have for AI today. Uh, if you think about, accounts payable teams do today, they receive invoices from hundreds of different vendors. And just like snowflakes, none of them seem to be the same, right? Format wise, right? So there's always a human there trying to decipher that invoice, manually keying in the data, matching it to a PO, routing it for approval. So it's time consuming, it's error prone. And with RPA and AI, you can automate that entire invoice process. You can do the text extraction, automatically match the GL codes, integrate directly with your SAP or your ERP of choice, and dramatically reduce the errors in processing time. So, we have another client right now where we processed an invoice that was 36 pages long. So you can imagine all of the line items and then all of the tax associated with each of those line items that needed to be compartmentalized and grouped into the right place in their accounting system. Um, and believe it or not, that 30-page invoice AI was able to process it at 100% accuracy rate in under a minute, and provide that data back to our workflow, our RPA, to then say, okay, put that into the accounting system. And so, those are the things where, you know, an AI bot can save tremendous amount of time, just eliminating the human error. Now, that doesn't mean that humans don't have to put eyes on it. Like we talked about, having the human in the loop, always a good thing. But they didn't have to do data entry for 3 to 4 hours on a 30-page invoice. Um, those don't need a break. They don't need a day off, and they don't really have bad days at data entry, right? So there's a consistency that you're getting there as well.
It does if you think about kind of how we opened up with kind of the defining AI and some of the myths and whatnot, right? When you really think about accounts payable and the procedure that we're going through there, right? That kind of monotonous matching function, the taking a lot of invoices, a lot of POs, a lot of documents that just kind of are just formatted differently, right? It's kind of a perfect example of kind of the combination of the different tools that are out there. We've all kind of learned, right, whenever we have these absolutes, always and must, well, they tend to be kind of not true, right? Because it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to say always. But in your experience with where things are right now, have you kind of come upon an organization where you can honestly say some degree of automation in the accounts payable area isn't right for them?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. The number of invoices can impact that, right?
Got it. So if there's just not enough activity going on,
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest with you, I mean, you know, do you get 10 invoices, even as a small company, a month? And again, multiplying, because I look at it as pennies turned into dollars, and those things add up, right? So even a small number of invoices for a small company, if you implemented something like this and it cost you pennies, what does it cost for your employee to do that time, to spend that time where they could be
sure.
doing other things, right? So let's just say it saves you $100 a week. That's $400 a month, right? Then what's that per year, right? These things start to add up. So I think that there's value in just about everybody kind of leveraging it
That's kind
for
of where I
sure.
was. If you're looking for kind of a way to kind of, I guess, tip your toe in the water and kind of understand what it might be. Now, I also think that AP is one of those areas where a lot of the software providers are having some of the AI embedded in their solutions.
Yeah,
So this really doesn't have to be some sort of standalone something that our organization
yeah,
creates. It's more in the selection of their software provider that sometimes it's actually embedded. You bring up kind of an interesting point as far as how to go through a little bit of that decision making as far as different processes, right, to maybe kind of consider using. And clearly, we always have the error rates and kind of the consistency, and the AI doesn't get sick and doesn't go on vacation. But just as
yeah.
far as think in terms of just kind of cycle times and whatnot, what are you seeing specific to AP that people should be thinking about time reduction if they were to truly implement AI in the AP area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say anywhere from 60 to 80% in some cases
Okay.
of reduction in time to process it, as well as error rates, which people don't think about, right? Error rates drop substantially. We actually we had completed a study. I worked with a group from Deloitte and Touche on error rates for data entry. And at the end of the study, they came back and said, they work with, I think, over 150 different companies on data entry. And they had figured out that about 20% of all data entered is wrong. That could have a huge impact on your accounts payable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, excellent. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah,
So let's move into HR. All right, so this is an area that, as I've seen the real life use cases out there, right, my mind doesn't run right to, I think, AI and automation, right? It runs to, I guess, accounts payable, right? It runs to those kind of mathematical, like kind of number things, right? Doesn't run to kind of
yes.
HR. So, how is AI being deployed in the HR world,
Yeah, I
HR
mean,
area, I
actually,
guess I should say.
I mean, it's a great question because HR is one of the places where it probably excels more than any place, really. The reason being is you've got employee manuals, safety guidelines, compliance policies. Um, if you're doing ISO audits, all of this stuff, and these documents are updated constantly. So with regulations change, distributing them constantly across the organization, instead of having a centralized knowledge base, which is just an AI bot where an employee can go, what's our vacation schedule this year? And what's our leave sick policy? And if there's a spillage, how do we handle this? What's the proper channel? How does it get reported? Right. So that's an HR side of things that, is really kind of interesting. When we talk about workflows, forms, compliance tracking, it's not all just AI, right? It's giving your employees something digital. And, I don't have my phone handy right now, but everybody's got their phone in their hand, right? So, and giving them a platform where they can find that information quickly and easily is really powerful. So the ROI shows up in labor savings, critically, and it also shows up in audit readiness. So when a regulator asks you for documentation, you can produce it immediately. That's where the real big value comes in for HR, where you're not spending 6 weeks in an audit. You're now cutting that down to maybe a week. Those are pretty big too.
Interesting. So when I kind of think about that, it's like, okay, so we have these kind of HR manuals, we have these kind of documents that are around, and we really don't know where to actually save them. And then when we figure out where we saved them, right, when the individual's onboarded, right, they remember where they saved them, where we saved them for 2 or 3 months, and then they kind of forget where they are. So
Yep.
we actually go through our days really not understanding maybe some of the policies and procedures of the organization because sometimes they're kind of hard to get back to. But if you actually had a chat bot that you could ask just like a chat GPT, right? Just like we're used to on our computers and phones. But if you had an internal organizational chat bot that you could ask those questions and say, hey, what's the policy in this situation? What are the holiday days? Hey, I'm going to be going out to dinner with a client. What are the expectations? Right? If you could just ask a chat bot those natural language questions, right? It just makes it takes away the stress from the individual because now they truly feel like they understand the policy, and it just doesn't take a lot of time to get there. So
Yeah,
I think it's an excellent example.
yeah, absolutely. And look, and that even flows into legality. Like if you ever get pulled into court about your something with an employee, one of the very first questions they're going to ask you is did that person have access to your employee manual? Did they sign it? So that, quote unquote, did they read it? Right? Not that anybody ever reads the employee manual, but you had to at least present it with them and have them sign it. So it also covers you there too from a legal
Uh,
perspective, which is great.
Yeah. And we find that in that regulatory kind of legal world, right? Just consistency, right? Being
Yeah.
able to kind of prove that, yep, they had access and organization was consistently pinging it and looking at really can be huge if you're in that unfortunate circumstance where you're just trying to defend what you did. So
Yeah.
all right, so let's kind of shift gears again and kind of go into that, I guess, marketing area, right? Maybe another not as obvious area that we've kind of thought about, certainly from a financial and accounting standpoint, right? Our minds don't run right to marketing. So I guess what's going on in the marketing world?
Yeah, that's probably I think it's one of the most exciting places for AI agents. That's where, you can start to set up these agents. And again, whether you do marketing or not, there's a lot of people, small companies, mid-sized companies that actually don't do a whole lot of marketing, right? Why? Because it's kind of expensive. And I think the AI agents make this a whole lot less expensive and more accessible, especially for small companies, where we can actually set up AI agents to go out and research. And that's their whole primary purpose is to go out and research things like LinkedIn, Reddit, any type of forum or other website that's specific to their industry. And what we're looking for is maybe there's pain points, maybe there's something that we do as a company where we're going to look and tell that agent to look for. It will then collect all of that information, summarize it, and hand it to another agent. And another agent will look at that and say, here's the advertisements or it's the messaging that we want to try to drive on our website or our email campaigns or our LinkedIn campaign. And we're going to build something in Canva. Now, Canva is like a marketing tool where you can build all these nice graphics and whatnot, but that agent will build it for you. And then it then says, okay, I built all these really cool ads. Here's 10 of them. give it to a distribution agent. That agent's going to say, okay, I'm going to put it out to your LinkedIn, to your Facebook, to your Twitter, to your X account, and we're going to go out and push that out. And then once it does that, it'll send it to another agent and say, okay, here's the information that I pushed out to these marketing companies or to these marketing channels, and I'm going to monitor them. I'm going to see who does the best. What message out of those 10 advertisements got the most clicks, got the most feedback? And then I'm going to hand that back to my research agent and I'm going to say, focus in on these because these seem to be the most prevalent pain points for my potential customers. That's huge. Like, and again, no human was there. This is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can actually put a human kind of in the middle of there, say before your ads go out. So marketing is really interesting, and it's really changing how people do marketing. And if you're not using an AI agent, you really should start looking at it because they're that powerful. And combining them makes all the difference in the world.
It's interesting. It seems like that's a combination of larger organizations tend to have access to more things just because they have more resources for tools and more resources for larger teams. So it seems like in this marketing area, AI is replicating larger teams at a cost-effective point. But then the analysis, right? Doing it a couple different ways and then tracking the effectiveness of the couple different ways, and then actually kind of fine-tuning and then the next iteration, the version 2.0, being that much more focused because of the analytical results, right? So not only is it taking what big companies have and their large marketing teams down to smaller organizations, it's actually adding that research, that analytical intelligence back into the model that's actually improving the end answer. It's perfect how it is really kind of transcending a lot of different areas here between the financial accounting, right, between the HR, between the marketing. Now, if we kind of maybe move a little bit back into something that is more traditional, right? If we think about this from an accounting standpoint, how about in the areas mergers and acquisitions and just kind of the just general asset management?
Yeah, I mean, look, mergers and acquisitions are, to say the least, or the amount of information that you're looking at is crazy. And this is again where AI is really great, right? It's the ability to take tremendous amount of information and distill it. Um, from you having to review hundreds of documents and trying to extract key data points and assessing risk, AI accelerates that drastically, right? It can rip through that. And then you're basically asking the questions that you typically would ask when you're making an M&A decision, right? It's done in a fraction of the time with greater consistency. It's giving you all of the sources where it built the answer from. That's critical as well, because I'm sure people have heard the word hallucination. If you haven't and you don't know what that means, it means that AI is smart enough to actually make up an answer. Um, and so, what we always tell people, what we always tell our clients is trust but verify, right? So, when it gives you an answer, make sure that you have a link to where that answer was extracted from. And then, always spot check it. And this is again, the human in the loop, even for mergers and acquisitions. But the amount of data in a mergers and acquisitions kind of scenario, and having AI distill that, huge, huge, huge win for that space for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's something that maybe we'll touch on a little bit later on too, but I feel it's like really relevant right now in what we just got done saying, right? As far as the hallucinations, as far as kind of the M&A space where we could have some NDAs that we've signed, certainly in the HR world and maybe even marketing, right? We don't want, so I guess talk to the group a little bit about, right, what we're talking about here is whether it be existing software that has it embedded or whether it be somebody like yourself coming in. We're not talking about using the public domain tools, right? We're talking about creating tools that are within your own environment. So you have a little bit of control over where that information goes.
Yeah, no, and that's really important. So, great point there, which is we actually build for most of our clients is we're building containers where their private data goes, which means it's not being, you know, uh, uh, I guess I can tell this story because everybody's going to remain nameless, but I had a potential client that, we sat down with one day. not too long ago in the past and said, "Oh, our accountant just left," and I was like, "Oh, so you're going to be replacing her?" And he said, "No, no, no. I've been taking all of our financials and I've been uploading them to ChatGPT, and I'm just asking ChatGPT questions." That's not a good way to do things. Um, I would highly discourage that. You can create your own private chatbots while using the large language models, but they do not retain the information where you're basically building your own private models. That's
Right.
really critical for security. And I think that's definitely something that whether you're using something that's got stuff baked into it or you're building something custom, you want to make sure that your so-called data bucket is private and
Yep.
nobody else has access to
Makes sense. Makes sense.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's pause for another quick poll question.
So I'm going to jump in while this poll is running. I don't have any pressing questions. So if you guys want to jump into the practical roadmap, like how to get started, that'd be great, you guys.
Perfect. Thank you. All righty. So just as said, Paul. So we made the use case, right, for AI and automation.
Yeah.
Now let's kind of get more rubber hits the pavement, right? Let's get practical. Somebody watching is thinking, all right, I want to explore this for my organization. Where do they start?
It's a good question. I think it's really about three things. It's process mapping, which is kind of identify what your team is doing in high volume that's repetitive, that you could probably take off their plate. Um, those are the best automation candidates, right? Data audit, understanding what data you have, where it lives, and how accessible it is. And then the last is stakeholder engagement. You need to align with your business priorities from the start, because the best technology in the world fails without organizational buy-in, right? You've got to have your people kind of behind that, and having individuals, whether they be the people who are you're eliminating that kind of repetitive task from, you still need buy-in from them, right? There's a lot of change there.
Would you say that an organization kind of doing this readiness assessment could kind of start off by literally using a chat GPT to say, hey, help me do a readiness assessment? And it would kind of coach them through a little bit to kind of just get
Yeah,
started?
yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, I often tell people, your AI or the responses that you get from AI are only good as the questions that you give it. And what I often tell people is leverage ChatGPT to build a really good prompt for you to get the information. Say, hey, I'm kind of looking for this. How would you phrase this clearly and concisely with a great amount of detail on me achieving X? And it will give you a much cleaner, concise prompt that you can then feed back into ChatGPT or Claude Code or OpenClaw, and probably get better results. So that's just as important. So use the exact technology that you're going to be using
Right,
to,
right.
to ask the
To
right
help you
questions.
assess
Yeah,
it. Yeah, it makes
yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
The other thing that I'm kind of thinking about here, as far as like where to get started and kind of thinking ahead, is right. We had early on, we were talking about the culture, right? As far as does this really reduce headcount? Right, we've talked about kind of the security, kind of the information. We've talked about kind of just maybe even just a learning curve as far as how to use this. So this whole AI and automation kind of conversation, it is a technology conversation because we're using kind of tools that are in that technology area, but it's really even more than that, right? It's more of a change management conversation also.
Yeah, I mean, there's a social aspect of this, right? Because like when we started this conversation today, it's all through the news, right? And AI is coming for your job, and people are like, oh, you might not have a job next week because of AI. It's not a reality, to be honest with you. And look, we always recommend starting to look for quick wins, processes that have clear return on investment and have measurable outcomes. And you want to demonstrate that value fast, not to just the C-level managers, but also to your employees who are doing that work on a daily basis, to give them the confidence to start leveraging that tool in a more kind of cross-functional way. This might involve IT, operations, and like I said, the actual day-to-day user. If the people doing the work aren't part of that design process, adoption suffers, and we've seen projects die on the vine because of user pushback. So you really want to have everybody kind of involved in that process, just at least with their hand on the steering wheel a little bit, right? That gives a lot more confidence to everybody in the chain.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just kind of thinking about as I've seen different organizations, and even just I mean my own experience, right? I think we go to a conference, we read something, we talk to another business individual, and we hear about AI, we hear about technology, automation. We kind of walk away feeling like we have to do something. And out of just true care and compassion for our organization, we come back to the office and it's like, all right, we got to do something. And we almost kind of without realizing it force our organization to use some of these tools and use some of the automation versus kind of the awareness at the leadership, right? When done the right way, I guess what I've seen a better way to do that is when you come back, right? So now you engage your teams, and if the front and a lot of times leadership isn't really in touch with some of those the actual tasks, right? We know 5 years ago when we wrote the policy how we expected this particular process at our organization to work, but then it's just evolved over years, right? So the individuals who are actually doing payroll, who are doing HR, who are doing AP, right? They really understand what they are doing. And if we were to sit down with those individuals and say, okay, the intent here is whatever you hate doing, let's talk about how do we take that off of your plate, right? So it is
Yeah.
kind of this leadership, top-down strategic thought, but then we need to shift the tables, right? And then interview and involve our younger individuals, our frontline individuals into the conversation. So then we say, okay, leadership really should describe the outcome and then have the frontline individuals help to choose what tools are we going to deploy to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. Because as soon as somebody's like, I'm in a meeting and I'm talking about a tool that's going to take away the thing that I do every Monday that I hate to do. Right now, we don't even have to worry about change management and adoption because the person loves the fact that they're going to get up, I guess, get that off their plate.
Yeah. No. I mean, look, we work with IT teams who are 6 months behind. Their
Yeah,
backlog is 6, 8 months behind. So, they're always looking for ways to kind of lighten the load a bit. Because if they're 6 months behind, those are requests that are coming in from the business that are not getting done. And they may be mission critical. So I think that's something to consider as well.
sure. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls and then kind of shifting over into some of the best practices. I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but maybe let's just make sure we kind of wrap up a little because it's such a big topic as far as the danger of having the organization march forward using these tools, getting excited about it, but then kind of accidentally giving sensitive information into the outside world.
Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the most critical things that we're seeing, and again, we work with some Pittsburgh companies around here as well. That is their only job, and they typically deal with DoD, where you don't necessarily want to release information of where the aliens are buried. And again, not necessarily critical here, but from a tax side, if you're using AI for regulated functions like tax advice without appropriate oversight, that's a compliance risk, right? And underestimating the governance requirements, this is why AI systems need to be monitored and audited and maintained. Now, that's also not to scare you away from using AI, right? At the same time, I used to say, we used to meet with a lot of different companies and they'd say, oh, we haven't updated our systems in 8 years, 10 years. So what we like to say is you've accumulated 10 years of technical debt because in 10 years, the computer industry's changed, the software world has changed so drastically that you've accumulated 10 years of debt, right? Of technical debt. And so it might be a little more expensive to actually implement something like this. Whereas if you don't implement something around AI or workflow or process automation or RPA, and you're not leveraging these tools that are available to you, I actually think that the technical debt clock is speeding up. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, we haven't done anything in 10 years. I think you're going to be like, well, we haven't done anything with AI in a year and a half. And really, it's almost like you're 3 years behind your competitors in your vertical space. I think the clock is now accelerating. The technical debt clock is now accelerated with the advent of AI. So I think,
Yeah.
that in itself is a risk to your business, right? So I think that's critical to understand as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you say it that way. The way that I've been kind of thinking about it just in my own world is that being an accountant, like we're always in Excel. I kind of remember a time that we didn't have Excel.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of make an argument to say, well, okay, I don't have to know Excel to be a good accountant. But boy, if I'm trying to be an accountant in today's day and age without being really good at Excel, I've really put myself at a disadvantage. And I think organizations kind of that same thing, right? If we're certainly not necessarily behind the eight ball, right? It's just happening right now. But over some period of time going forward, organizations who aren't necessarily at least aware of how it could be implemented in their world, right, we're going to find ourselves probably a little bit at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and
Hey
I'm sure
guys,
there's 150 accounting tools out there that, everybody's using now, right? Beyond spreadsheets.
I did have a
Go ahead.
question come in. Can you discuss AI governance? I know you touched a little bit on it, Paul, but I don't know if you can get in there a little deeper with that topic.
Yeah, I mean, governance is definitely a very broad topic, right? So governance from not only internally within your organization, but whatever vendors you're choosing, whether that's Azure, OpenAI, if you're dealing with ChatGPT, Claude Code, or Claude, um, all of those things need to be kind of at least documented from a high level. And then you're basically creating a person within your own organization who's going to manage and control that. And that's critical, especially in an audit. Not only to make sure that private information doesn't escape the confines of your AI engine, but also, just even today where your information is stored, a lot of times AIs can actually be pointed at where that information is stored and just ingest it. It doesn't need to be quote unquote copied to it. Um, and so it's kind of the same governance that you have around your document storage uh, within your organization needs to be also applied to your AI. Obviously, there's some exceptions there, which is understanding your providers. Are they SOC 2 compliant? Are they HIPAA compliant? What information are you putting out there? And you may have multiple engines. You might have an engine for HR. You might have an engine for production. You may have an engine for accounting. So, separating those engines is just as critical in the governance process. Hopefully
The
that
other thing
gives
that I've
more.
Yeah, the other thing, and this is just a very minor kind of pointed example, the other way that I've seen AI used, so there's the governance and regulation around the AI, but having AI help you with the governance and the regulations that you're trying to follow. That I've seen AI bots that are scouring for personal information in places where the personal information shouldn't be. And so identifying that breach, identifying where, oh, this process isn't really working the way that we think it should. We just have this information now that's on this server that has somebody's social number in it. How did that happen? So having it be the I guess red light that goes off in some of these I guess environments is what I've seen also.
Yeah, I mean, look, we actually have some of the clients that we deal with is if they upload a document, we actually use AI or our AI engine, our large language model, to search for personal identifiable information. If we find that, we expose that to the user who's trying to upload the document and say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Now, if they say yes, then that triggers off an approval process, right? So we need somebody beyond the person who's trying to upload it to actually approve it before it goes into the AI engine, even if it's redacted. But we can actually auto redact the documents before they even go into the AI engine. My thing is that you still probably want a second level advise to look at that document and say, hey, Sarah's trying to upload this document. It's already been redacted, but is this still something we want to add to our corporate engine, if you will? Um, and that's also part of that governance structure that you're going to kind of build, or will help you build, within your organization.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So prior to kind of large language models and this current AI conversation, seemed like all the technology conversation was around cybersecurity. And how do we make sure that we don't click on the wrong link and whatnot? Help us understand a little bit kind of the intersection between now all these AI tools and automation and the actual just good old fashioned cybersecurity to keep our organizations protected.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great question because we're seeing from our side, we're obviously lots of coders and we use a lot of open source, not open source, but Claude Code, OpenClaw, all of the latest coding models, right? And what the best practices are is do not put it on a machine that has your email address on it or any other access to any of your other third-party services. If in fact you use a key, make sure that that key is protected through there's several different methods, so that that AI model doesn't necessarily have that key to autonomously go and do something. Um, we've heard stories of people checking out on Friday and handing basically the keys to their all of their third party solutions. The AI agent runs all weekend and they come back to a $25,000 bill on Monday because they never told the AI agent that it couldn't just spend autonomously. So there's certain things that you want to make sure that just on a security level, you just never do. So if you do have a development team and you have developers, set up separate machines to where they can use those Claude codes. Do not put it on there where they have their Outlook email. Do not put it on there where that has access to um, their LinkedIn accounts that have access to your ability to do to buy marketing time or to spend on marketing ads. That should all be, again, this is the human in the loop where you can avoid some of these, and I guess we could even call that under the pitfalls. That security, there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So if you had to kind of put your crystal ball out in front of us and think about kind of, it seems like the stuff is moving fast and how
Yeah.
good it is and how capable, how human-like it is. Do you have any kind of gut feelings as far as what might we be seeing next as far as kind of availability of tools, or I guess where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, there was just a new uh, large language model that was released last week, and the DoD actually shut it down because it was too smart. Um, um, I think that it's going to become, they're saying that it actually every 6 months it actually doubles in intelligence. It's not sentient, but some people will argue to you that it is, but I don't believe it is. I think it's very good at ingesting tremendous amounts of data, and providing, and I think it's just going to get better, right? Um, I had somebody who tested that new large language model last week on our team, and he had two websites that he said, okay, I'm going to build this website from scratch. And he gave it, all of the requirements that he wanted in the website and what it was for. And he gave it to the old model. And then he gave it to the new model. And the new model was like absolutely beautiful. The old one had some issues. You could see where he was going to make 10, 15, 16 iterations to get it to the point where the new model got it on the first try. So there are some amazing tools coming out. I think some of the big challenges too you're going to have with bigger companies who built this technology into it is they may not be able to adapt as quickly as smaller base companies, um, because there's obviously a lot more steps that they have to go through to ensure, you know, to get a piece of software out the door, whereas a small company can do things much quicker. I guess that's probably the point there.
Right.
So they might not be able to take advantage of all that great technology that came out this month or really 5 months ago because they built it all on the large language models that came out, 9 months ago. So
Keeping
always
yourself a
keep
little
that in
bit
mind.
flexible would be kind of key in this kind of
Absolutely.
stage that we're at right now where things are evolving and changing fast.
Really fast. Yes. Yeah. And it's a war, right? Between Grok, Google, uh, Claude, right? You kind of go right through it. Copilot, right? This is the new arms race, and I'm not sure where it really ends just yet, but it's exciting.
It
There's no
is
problem.
exciting times.
Yeah.
Let's pause real quick for our last poll question. All right, so last question for you, Paul. Um, what is the single most important thing that you like people to leave with after listening to this today?
Don't wait for the perfect conditions. Organizations that are winning with AI right now didn't start with a massive transformation program, right? They started with one good use case, proven value, and they built from there. So the technology is accessible, the ROI is definitely real, and the cost of inaction, right? That technical debt that we talked about, it's growing, right, on a daily basis. So I would say start somewhere, even if it's small.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Great conversation today.
No,
So,
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
absolutely. Alrighty, this concludes the webinar today. I'd like to thank Paul for his insights. I'd also like to thank you for your time and interest. Presentation materials and a recording of the webinar will be made available in the coming days. Please keep an eye on your inbox for correspondence from us with a link to access the recording. CPE certificates will be emailed separately. Please allow some time to process the CPE certificates and share the certificates. We are planning to host additional webinars on this topic specific to the manufacturing and construction industries. Please stay tuned for further details regarding the event, which will be shared soon. Also, please feel free. A lot of you have my contact information, Jessica's contact information. Please feel free to, if you have an idea for something that you think would be great for a large audience that Paul and I could talk about, we are all ears. Once again, thank you for participating today. Have a good rest of your day.